Welcome to Tower Talk Business Radio on the voice of Nassau Community College 90.3 WHPC. Tower Talk Business Radio brings you conversations with the top business minds on Long Island and around the nation, including expert consultants and small business owners who have found success, but are also willing to share their top tips, failures, and give gritty, matter-of-fact advice based on their first-hand experience. And now, let's get down to business with Tower Talk Business Radio, powered by the Nassau Community College Foundation.
Hello and welcome to Tower Talk Business Radio, powered by the Nassau Community College Foundation. My name is Ray Schwetz, AVP of Nephew Business Banking, along with Donyshia Boston-Hill, CEO, keeper of the brand marketing and digital agency. And we're focused on being the premier resource for business and entrepreneurship. We bring you weekly business advice, tips, tools, and services that help you grow your business. Plus, we interview top business leaders in the industry. Now, today's episode, we've got some tough stuff. We've got taxes, trusts, estates. It's very overwhelming stuff for business owners, and not just for business owners, but also if you have a family, a home, a vacation home, a retirement plan, insurance, it's a lot. It's a lot for a person. It's a lot for a business. And if you don't have some of these things, that can be also very, very overwhelming. So I'm very excited to introduce you today to a gentleman who has been a friend of mine in the networking world. Helping provide us with business empowerment today is our guest, Matthew Rappaport, Esquire, Vice Managing Partner, of Falcon, Rappaport, and Berkman PLLC. He also chairs the taxation and private client groups for the firm. He concentrates his practice on taxation as it relates to real estate, closely held businesses, private equity funds, and trusts and estates. Matthew has graduated from Washington University in St. Louis. He received his Juris Doctor and Masters of Laws in Taxation from Georgetown University Law Center in 2011. And Mr. Rappaport is licensed to practice in New York and is an active member of the Nassau County Bar Association, the New York State Bar Association, and the American Bar Association section of taxation. So that's a lot. Welcome to the show, Matthew.
Appreciate it, Ray. I'm proud to be here. Nothing like a bio that makes you sound a lot cooler than you actually are.
No, I'd say in this case it's pretty darn accurate. And he's also probably you are also probably one of the busiest people that I know.
Yeah, I have conflicting feelings about that. I feel like if you have truly reached a high level of success, you're never as busy as I seem to be all the time. You manage to say no to things every now and again. So, you got
to practice.
I wrestle with that every now and again. But it's kind of like a positive feedback loop. As you see success and you see results, you get reminded of why you say yes to things so many times. And, it is rewarding in that sense.
Yes. Well, I hope you look back and you're glad that you said yes to doing the show today.
Lord willing.
Yes. So tell us how you got so busy. Tell us how you got to this point.
I feel like I'm wrestling between whether I should do the abridged version or the unabridged version. But in general, I feel like everything that led me to this point was out of necessity. Weirdly, I feel almost like I was too naive when I was in school to understand what the real world was like. Mm-hmm. And that led me to make decisions such as go into debt $250,000 to get my education, which immediately put me behind the eight ball. Now, combine that with when I exited school, there weren't any jobs. So I got a pretty good education, I feel, when and I'm saying this in the name brand sense, if only because I'm a proud graduate of Herrick's High School in New Hyde Park, and I feel like that was actually the best substantive education I got. And then I ran off and I paid a huge bill to go get education at two highfalutin institutions, and I don't even think they actually measured up to my public high school out here.
Wow.
So there was that part. But then when I exited school, I had a couple of things hit me pretty hard. One of them was the education was valuable insofar as what it prepared you to do, not what people were immediately going to pay you to do. So if, as a tax lawyer, what I've learned is, as I've built my skill set, people will pay me for my knowledge and expertise and the way I can solve problems. But ultimately, what I learned coming out of school was you still need real world experience before people will actually pay you lots and lots of money to do that.
Sure.
And so I came out, I didn't have a job. I was taking the bar exam, and I was facing, in July of 2012, a $2,100 loan payment that I did not have the means to make as I took the February of 2012 bar exam. And so I began behind the 8 ball. And how did I get so busy? Effectively, to loop it back around to answer your question.
Well, you got to pay that.
Yeah, it was just, you have a kick in the rear end immediately, and it's, okay, what are you going to do to survive? And nothing will breed effort and motivation and industriousness quite like necessity.
Well, you really touch on something. For me, it's key, and that's really in developing any relationship where you're going to engage a professional and, pay for their advice, their services. It's you got to trust them. And the way to trust them is to get to know them. So, and that's the way you and I met through networking. I think that was an effective way for me to understand, hey, you know what? This guy really knows what he's talking about. So, kudos to you for effectively communicating that to somebody who...
I appreciate that.
And I didn't know you had a hole in the wall. I met you through networking.
Sure.
Got to know you. And not only were you just a great person to talk to, you can tell that everything you do is from the heart. And it makes it easier to open up to you about some things that are pretty tough. Because you don't handle... This is not easy stuff that you handle, right?
It depends on the way that you analyze it. To a certain extent, and as you know, there are really two sides to the practice. There's the wills and trust side, and there's the tax law side. Yeah. When you deal with the tax law side, that's a little bit easier because even though the numbers get to be eye-poppingly large, it's only money. I mean, oftentimes, and I say this flippantly, but I certainly don't mean to diminish the seriousness of it. But sometimes when my associates and my colleagues are flipping out about something that is associated with a large transaction for tax planning, I always tell them, listen, what we don't do here is we don't do something like run the pediatric ward at Memorial Sloan Kettering. Right. We're not dealing with life and death. We're not dealing with, anything that is going to, we're going to lose the patient. We're not in that business. We're in the business of extremely wealthy people are going to get to keep more of their money than they otherwise would, which if that's not the outcome, then ultimately speaking, you're not going to be on the front page of the newspaper, for something negative. I mean, so there is that part. On the wills and trust side, however, that is life and death, right? It's the question of adequately preparing somebody for either a traumatic or catastrophic circumstance or literally their own death, somebody else's death, and that gets to be more serious. You deal with family dynamics. You deal with, will somebody be caught up in lawsuits or road administration of an estate for the rest of his or her life or a large chunk of his or her life, or will somebody be prepared enough to not pay taxes, to have an easy and streamlined process, to prevent people from fighting with each other, to make sure that everything about the transition of your business and your property and your homes is all smooth. That does tend to be a little more serious. So for me, I think there's kind of two sides to the coin depending on which area I'm practicing in at any given time.
Yeah, that's fair enough. You are listening to Tower Talk Business Radio. Our guest today is Matthew Rappaport, Esquire, Vice Managing Partner of Falcon, Rappaport, and Berkman PLLC. My name is Ray Schwetz, along with Donyshia Boston-Hill on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. So, what is it that about your business that you like to focus on with your clients? What's to you like the top priority?
If it is tax law oriented, I think the biggest thing to do is to present the client with a menu of options to accomplish his or her goals. Okay. And then to try and shepherd the client along in choosing from those options. Everything from, and granted, the options are different in every set of facts and circumstances, but at one end of the spectrum, you have just pay your taxes as you normally would, and don't alter anything and go with the default scenario. All the way to, this is the most aggressive possible thing you could do that is within the law, but the risk level is X. Right. And trying to divine from the client, basically, what is your risk tolerance? What are you willing to do in order to get the benefits that you seek? Mm-hmm. And then after that, being practical about stuff. Sometimes it's about risk when it's a client's individual decision. Sometimes when you're putting a deal together and multiple parties are involved, sometimes it's not even about risk. Sometimes it's about, will the other party in the deal cooperate with you? Mm-hmm. And a whole bunch of other human factors about whether or not you can accomplish the tax goals that you're looking to achieve. But generally speaking, the thing that I focus on when I'm practicing tax law is, what can we accomplish here conceivably? Mm-hmm. Is the client right for it? And if there are any other parties in a deal to communicate with, what will be their anticipated reaction? And if it's a deal, you're trying to close the deal. You're not there to, hog the spotlight or run up a bill or anything like that. When you're brought in as a tax lawyer to any given deal, you're there to close the deal. Mm-hmm. On the wills and trust side, however, I think the major focus really depends on somebody's level of wealth, mm-hmm. somebody's family situation, whether or not somebody owns a business. And ultimately, your goal there is to make recommendations to the client about ways to proceed that will not only make the client's life easier, perhaps, or improve the client's situation based on financial or tax outcomes, but it's also to make sure that the client's entire family is protected. That a lot of the estate planning process is to make sure that if you become disabled, or if you pass away, or if something else really traumatic or catastrophic happens to you, that not only are you prepared for it, your family is prepared for it, because typically speaking, it's your family that deals with the most fallout. It's not actually you.
Right. Yeah, because you're no longer there.
In some cases, you're no longer there. In some cases, you're there, but you're non-responsive, which could be even more stressful for a family than death.
Right.
In other instances, it could be that you've encountered issues related to things like substance abuse and addiction. Mm-hmm. And there's all different sorts of ways that you as attorney can help a client plan for these different contingencies to make sure, it's a little bit of a weird business, if only because the successful outcome is making sure that it is not as negative as it otherwise would be.
Right.
Somebody's passed away. I mean, everybody's upset. But at the same time, if you don't have to deal with all this other fallout, the preventing further pain is really weird. Like, I don't know. Have you ever read the Inserto series by Nassim Nicholas Taleb?
No.
Really interesting, right? So, and then the guy's like one of the smartest people I've ever heard of, although I've never met him personally. And one of the things he writes in his books is, no politician ever gets credit if the politician had foresight to understand that a disaster was coming and then take steps to avert a disaster that nobody else ever really knew was going to occur. Clearly, objectively, the politician should get credit for, if you passed a law requiring seatbelts before cars even went on the road, nobody would know any different from what life would be like without seatbelts. But yet you saved hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of lives. But yet that's not the way the world works. Estate planning is kind of like that, right? Somebody's dead, somebody's disabled, somebody's out, and then everybody is automatically upset. But it's no time for you to get in there and gloat about, hey, I know that you're upset about something really traumatic happening to a loved one, but at the same time, could you imagine what it'd be like if you also had to deal with running their business, or you had to deal with not having any money, or nobody takes credit for that type of stuff. But ultimately,
that's a very good point. That's
the outcome you're looking for, and very few clients recognize that, which you have to, as attorney, you have to deal with. It's a bit thankless in that way.
Yeah, but you have to bring it home. You are listening to Tower Talk Business Radio. Our guest today is Matthew Rappaport, Esquire, Vice Managing Partner of Falcon, Rappaport and Berkman PLLC. My name is Ray Schwetz, along with Donyshia Boston-Hill, on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
20 illegal online pharmacies appear each day, but you can find safe and legitimate pharmacies online by looking for .pharmacy in a web address. Learn more at safe.pharmacy. A public service from the National Association of Boards of Pharmacy.
Welcome back to Tower Talk Business Radio, powered by the Nassau Community College Foundation, on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Ray Schwetz, along with Donyshia Boston-Hill, and our guest today is Matthew Rappaport, Esquire, Vice Managing Partner of Falcon, Rappaport Berkman PLLC. So, we've covered a lot so far, and I think people are getting to know you, which I think is really important when it comes to the type of business that you do. Because as you said, sometimes this stuff is, you're, as you said, averting disaster that people aren't even aware is potentially going to come their way. Now, something that people are aware of, and I think there's some concern about is the new tax laws and how it applies to, a family, how it applies to a business. So is that something that you could talk about with us?
Yeah, sure. I've been doing a lot of speaking about it. I've been advising clients about it. I've been writing about it, and it's the topic that dominates my professional life today, especially now that it's an environment in which people are now taking stock of what the impact is in terms of, numbers. Because originally when they passed the law, nobody saw any numbers and it was very abstract. Now the numbers are starting to roll in for people. So I think I'll separate it into two categories. If you're on Long Island and you are a homeowner, I think one of the major impacts is going to be changes to the state and local tax deduction. Under previous laws, many people know, if you itemized your deductions, you got to deduct your local property taxes and you got to deduct the income taxes you paid to New York State, regardless of where those income taxes came from, investments, your day job, anything along those lines. Now, the government doubled the standard deduction to discourage people from taking itemized deductions, and the itemized deductions for state and local taxes went down. So now you have a $10,000 coupon usable on any combination of your income, property, or sales and use taxes that you pay to New York State or to your local municipality, depending on the jurisdiction that collects your property taxes. The issue that a lot of Long Island homeowners are going to encounter is that $10,000 coupon doesn't go anywhere when if you live in Westbury or you live in Rockville Center or you live in some of these areas that are just middle-class areas on Long Island, you're still paying like $12,000 in property taxes alone, not to mention what you're paying in New York State income taxes that from the wages from your day job.
Yeah.
The issue is not so much that your taxes are going to go so far up or so far down. In most cases, I don't think it's made a huge impact in any given direction. But I think you're going to see an effect on the housing market because a lot of people are going to take a look at what their outcome would be in New York versus what it would be in, say, Florida.
Right.
And the difference is going to be really big.
Yeah.
And people in New York have relatives in Florida. They have relatives in Nevada. They have relatives in Texas. And they all talk to each other. And what the relatives down south are going to say in these no-tax or low-tax states is they're going to say, goodness gracious, I had such a bigger refund or such a lower tax bill this year.
Right.
And everybody in New York is going to be back there saying, well, based on all these changes, even though I got all my rates cut, based on the changes in all of these deductions, I didn't see much of a difference at all. That doesn't seem fair, right? So for a lot of people, I think they're going to see the housing market get impacted. And I think for certain people that are in upper middle class areas, for certain people that are paying really outsized property taxes, if you're in Old Brookville, if you're in Lloyd's Neck by Huntington, if you're in some of these really, really wealthy areas, Hewlett Harbor, for instance, you may see a negative impact because your property tax deduction was like so high and your income tax deduction was also so high because you were earning a high wage.
Right.
So you were paying a lot of income taxes to New York State. Now, if you itemize, your entire property/income tax deduction is limited to $10,000, which is not much. And if you take the standard deduction for a married couple, it's $24,000. But that could be like a third of what you were paying in total property and income taxes, which is a big impact on you. Are the rate cuts enough to make up for that? I don't think so. So all these folks are going to be asking themselves, is this enough of a motivation for me to move? Of course, tax shouldn't control your life. I mean, maybe if you still want to be close to your relatives in New York, you're going to stick it out. But I feel it's going to have, even if you're a regular Long Island homeowner, the negative impact is not so much going to be movement up or down unless you're in a really nice area. The impact is going to be, look at what all these people are getting in a benefit, and I'm not getting so much of a benefit. And then the side impact of, who wants to buy a home in Nassau or Suffolk if they can't deduct fully their property taxes anymore? It's a big impact.
Yeah.
And not to mention, they changed the mortgage interest deduction for every mortgage you take out 2018 and beyond. So you can only deduct the interest on $750,000 of principal, not $1 million. Well, on Long Island, you could buy a regular home for $1 million with a 20% down payment, and all of a sudden, there's a small slice of your interest that's not deductible anymore.
Right.
I feel this is going to affect the housing market around here negatively, and I think people may see a detriment financially just for that reason, even if their tax bill hasn't moved in either direction very far. So that's, I think, in a nutshell, the biggest impact you're looking at for homeowners. For businesses, I think the biggest impact will be this whole 20% deduction for anyone who's a pass-through, meaning you're not a C corporation. That 20% deduction is confusing. It's complicated because there are all sorts of rules for determining whether you qualify or you don't. You're going to need to work with a CPA to try and figure it out, not only because the mechanical calculations are complicated, but also because there are judgment calls to make. And that's really my job as tax lawyer. The CPAs, I think, like having me around because they can outsource tough judgment calls to me.
Right.
One of them is, hey, does my client qualify for this 20% deduction, or does he or she not qualify? And that can make a big difference because the 20% deduction is not capped. So if you earned $500K in net business income in 2018, if you qualify for the deduction in full, you could be eligible for a deduction of $100,000. That's real money.
Right.
So the pass-through deduction is a major, major impact. And then beyond that, there's what they call bonus depreciation, meaning that instead of deducting the cost of business property over 5 years or 7 years, you could potentially deduct all of it upon purchase, which is pretty cool because you get to deduct way more money in year one than you otherwise would. Right. Those changes, I feel, will have a big, big impact. But there's so much across this tax law that you can't even go into it in the time we have allotted. I just hope those tidbits are helpful for people.
No, very. I think it is. You are listening to Tower Talk Business Radio on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Ray Schwetz, along with Donyshia Boston-Hill, and our guest today is Matthew Rappaport, Esquire, Vice Managing Partner of Falcon, Rappaport, and Berkman PLLC. Yeah, I mean, to me, that's very helpful, and it is so new, and we're really just beginning to feel it, on Long Island and everywhere, frankly. Now, you talked a little bit about what type of work you do. You talked a little bit about your challenges. Let's talk about the practice itself. Now you're paired with partners to cover from a holistic standpoint, business and individual planning, correct?
Absolutely. That was the major motivation for merging. It was forming this partnership was about going beyond tax and trust and estates law to collaborating with my partners on pure business or corporate law, on real estate law, on litigation, intellectual property, these topics where all of my clients would have questions about them, and I would have to tell them, I don't specifically handle that. I know somebody who can, and let me bring this person in for you. Before we merged, before we formed this partnership, the issue was the client was getting two different bills. The client had to call two different phone numbers. There were too many complications involved. I was calling them colleagues, but really the clients were referring to them as partners anyway, and it just became nonsensical to stay separate.
Right.
And the major motivation was we need to provide these services together. We need to come up with a more efficient economic model to make everything financially worthwhile for us. And we also needed the cachet behind saying, I'm no longer Matthew E. Rappaport, Esquire, LLM. Instead, I am Vice Managing Partner of Falcon, Rappaport, and Berkman PLLC, a firm with a dozen attorneys in it that can handle a wide range of areas. And that has already opened up a wider range of clientele, more than I could ever bring in if I were simply still on my own.
Yeah. And it like you said, it makes just good business sense because I know I mean, trusting you with everything you're giving me advice with, I would want to go with those people anyway. And it's to make a one-stop shop. It's fantastic. So I'm sure that your clients appreciate it. And it certainly makes it easier when you're working with someone and you're referring them. The last thing you want to do is refer them to, as you said, 3 different phone numbers, 3 different calls, because the fact of the matter is you're also reducing the success of that person actually making things happen, because we all get busy. So maybe we'll make 1 phone call and not the 3rd. Now here we just have to worry about making the 1.
I agree completely. And not only that, you know Jeff.
Yes.
And you've met Jeff, and
yes.
Jeff is a first-class guy and an amazing lawyer, and that was the type of caliber of person that I wanted to surround myself with when I opened an enterprise. I wasn't just going to go into business with anybody, but I feel between Jeff, my law school classmate Ken Falcon, who's managing partner of the firm, who I'm not sure if you've met, but fits the same criteria: high integrity, high class, excellent lawyer, and then the 4th partner, who, for reasons I'm not even going to get into, didn't want her name on the firm. But Michelle Schlereth is dual licensed as both an attorney and a CPA, and is, in fact, the smartest person in the entire firm, although she won't admit that to you. So it's just surrounding yourself with people who elevate you. And, the old saw of you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. I wanted to make sure that the people I spent the most time with were people who I respected, people who I admired, and people who I wanted to collaborate with every day. And given how much I work, if I didn't have that, I would be miserable. So
you're seeing them a lot. Now, I haven't met Mr. Falcon, but here's a connection. So Mr. Falcon is related to Captain America, which is related to Hydra. And I want to talk about Hydra.
Yes, of course.
So I know the person who's listening out there is going, what are you talking about? How did you switch into Hydra? But networking is very important, right? So that's how we met. That's how you meet individuals and you get experience with them. So what is Hydra? Tell us a little bit about it.
We called it Hydra Collective, and originally it was a placeholder name. We were going to change it, but we joked that it made us sound like G.I. Joe villains. We came up with the name before Captain America even came out, and then all of a sudden we're sitting there groaning to each other like, oh goodness, we know what's coming now. But nevertheless, what it was designed for was, it started in July of 2013, and it was formed because we were going to networking groups, and we were all under 40, and people were dismissing us because of our age. And we said, we need a space for all of us to network and meet each other and develop business where people would not just dismiss us out of hand because of appearance. And that model became successful. But the interesting thing is, it is going through a major shift at the moment.
Okay.
Because the whole meet up at a bar and shake hands with each other, that model is outdated now. The thing that we are shifting to is we're shifting to a management forum where we could all air out the concerns that we have now that we didn't have 6 years ago, such as being partner in a business or running your own business and dealing with management issues and high-level business development issues, and having a peer space for us to sort of coach and advise each other.
That's
that
fantastic.
that shift was necessary, because if we didn't make it, the group would have become stale and eventually folded. So I'm glad you asked. It's undergoing a major change.
Well, it's evolved. That's fantastic. Hail Hydra.
Yeah. Well, trying not to go that route, right? Trying not to bring down the entire planet Earth.
So tell us now, how can people find you?
Sure. So we've been so busy in the 6 months since we formed the partnership that the website is still under construction. But theoretically speaking,
leave a phone number.
When people go ahead and listen to this at a later time, hopefully they'll find a fully fledged website. You could find it at frblaw.com, Frank Robert Brian LAW.com, and the phone number where you could reach us, 516-599-0888. The firm is Falcon, Rappaport, and Berkman PLLC.
Excellent. Matthew, thank you so much for being with us. We want to thank Matthew for being with us. My name is Ray Schwetz, along with Donyshia Boston-Hill, your co-hosts and producers. The creative director of Tower Talk Business Radio is Rudy Breedy. This is an NCC Foundation Business Leaders Council production. Visit ncc.edu/WHPC for more information. Available on iHeartRadio as a podcast in iTunes, Android Podcast, and Spreaker. This has been Tower Talk Business Radio, powered by the Nassau Community College Foundation on the voice of Nassau Community College 90.3 WHPC. We'll talk with you next week.